What is up, Defects? We're back for another video, and we got one that has been on the mind of sellers for the last couple of years because the changes sounded like they were coming and then they didn't come. But before we get into all that, let me say what up to my boy, the Butcher. What up, brother?
What is up, Matty Forge? Yes, Matt sent me this email earlier this week. It's back again, guys. If you're doing online transactions, selling comic books, or anything in general, you might want to pay attention to what's going on here.
That's right. That's right. So, as we know, back in 2021, the government passed some changes to online selling platforms such as PayPal, Venmo, Etsy, eBay that would change the threshold at which they sent a 1099K automatically for you to the government. Okay, so what does this mean? So, if you just to keep it simple, the change was going to be if you sold $600 worth of goods and or services. Okay, so anything that, like, let's say for instance eBay or Etsy, they automatically are goods and services, right? So in the past you had to send them yourself essentially. So again, let me start again, Jay, and say that before you take any of this information and start doing your taxes with it, we're just giving you some information, but please go to a tax professional to make sure you have all this information straight and to make sure everything we're saying is 100% factually true. We're reading, news articles and things like that. We're not tax professionals unless Jay has that side gig that I don't know about, Jay. You know
Not
what I
me,
mean?
not me.
All right, so starting over. Before, you used to have to make either $20,000 in transactions or 200 transactions, and then places like eBay, PayPal goods and services, Etsy would automatically send that 1099K form for you to the government. Okay. If you were made under that threshold, you would still receive one, and you were supposed to send that to the government yourself with your taxes and whatever your losses, whatever your expenses were, and figure all that out for you. Okay. So the government wasn't going to dig into that. They would just assume that you were doing the right thing and sending that transaction, no matter what the threshold was. It was, if it sold $10,000 worth of goods and services, you would be required to send that yourself. They wanted to change this threshold for the 2023 tax year, Jay, to be $600, and people were kind of freaking out about it because no one could really understand what was really going on. Do you remember that last year when everyone was still freaking out?
This was a hot topic last year because, listen, especially in the comic book industry, in the comic book market, $600 could be one book. It could be two books. It could not even be one book. So to get taxed on that, here's my thing on taxes, right? You get taxed when you get paid. You get taxed when you go to the store to buy something. You just get taxed on everything. When I run for president, which I will, you get taxed when you get paid, and that's it. All the taxes are gone.
So, guys, let's be clear again. Pay your taxes. Don't try to avoid them. That's the advice we're giving. Okay, so do what you got to do, but we're saying follow the letter of the law, get an account, do what you got to do. Now, what happened for 2023 before the calendar year of 2023 started? Okay, they changed the law that said, okay, we can't do this $600 threshold because, number one, we don't have the manpower, because they were just going to get an influx and a tremendous amount more of these 1099K forms, because small businesses operate at a low, people think about you. Did you sell one comic on eBay for more than $600? You would have got a form sent to the government, and that would have been automatically reported for you. Okay. They knew that they couldn't handle that influx. Plus, there was a lot of confusion behind this, so they delayed it. So for the 2023 tax year, the $20,000 threshold or 200 transaction is still in place, which we weren't sure that was going to happen, but we just got word. So the 2023 tax year is about to end, and now you're about to report your transaction. So if you did $10,000 on eBay or Etsy or PayPal goods and services, those will not be sent automatically for you. You will be required to send that in with whatever you want to show as your profit and your loss. Okay, we're not going to get into the minutia of doing all that. We're just trying to report on the facts. Okay, the latest change is that is going to remain in place for 2023. In 2024, the threshold will change to $5,000. So it's going to go from $20,000 to $5,000 for the 2024 tax year, which means when you're doing your taxes in 2025, that January, February 2025, when you're doing your taxes, that's going to be 5Gs. And then for 2025 tax year, which is going to be like January, February of 2026 when you're reporting, we assume that that's going to be when the $600 threshold will begin. But a lot can change between now and then. We could have a new regime. We could have a new administration. We don't know who's going to be in office, so a lot could change between now and then. So let's just stick with what's going to happen for this tax year and next tax year, which will be that $5,000 threshold. So I know there's probably going to be a lot of questions in the comments. So Jay had some questions for me when we were going through this. So what we're going to do is we're probably going to just try to do a Q&A here to kind of answer some of the questions that you would have to the best of our abilities. And then if there's additional questions beyond that, like I said, I would go to a tax professional. So Jay, how do you want to do this? How do you think we should answer the most questions that we're going to get answered?
I just got a couple of questions because Matt dug into this thoroughly. I kind of just glanced over it. Now, you're saying PayPal's coming into the mix, which probably means Venmo, Cash App, Zelle, right? Think about how many transactions a day go on those companies worldwide, right? Which means they're going to have more manpower in researching this type of information, right? Does that necessarily mean now fees are going to go up for using these apps and these financial services? And then let's talk about manipulating it a little bit, right? So it's kind of like the OJ book. I do not manipulate it, but if I were to manipulate it, how would it go? With comic books, it's very tough because I asked Matt, okay, what happens if I bought a Fantastic Four number 48 first appearance of Silver Surfer for $1,000, and then I sold it at a loss when the market came down a little bit for $500? So many people are going to be able to manipulate that, right? Because how is the IRS going to know, okay, he bought a 9.0, but he sold a 5.0? There's no way to kind of track this. So people are going to be able to make their own numbers as long as they're giving something to the government. That's how I took this, Matt. What do you think?
Right. So without getting too crazy, because I've talked some about this with my account, and there is specific laws for collectibles and hobbies, tax laws. So again, check with your accountant on this information. Okay. But in the case, like Jay said, of one book, you're selling at a loss. They're allowing for you to sell at a loss and take that into account. So the 1099K is still going to be given to the IRS. Now you're able to say, hey, I bought this book for more than I sold it for, so that $1,000 is not actually $1,000. I operated at a loss for that one book. And unless you get audited, you don't necessarily you should have that receipt. Try to keep everything documented. Try to keep all your receipts. Try to keep sales. Track them somehow.
Looking to clean and press your books before submission? Well, look no further than the best in the business, Erod 212 with Express Comic Book Pressing Service. Defects 10 gets you 10% off. Erod will submit your books to CGC and CBCS and pass along his discount. Hit him up on Instagram or email expresscbp@yahoo.com.
I'm glad you answered that because that was my next question. What happens if you buy a bunch of books at a show? What happens if you go to a yard sale and buy a bunch of books? How are they going to be able to keep track of everything? What this is telling me is they're not going to be able to monitor everybody, but they want something. They want something. They want you to provide something in the end.
Right. Well, all right. So, and again, like as far as if you use PayPal, but you use friends and family, or use Venmo, and it's like a person you trust, there's like you're repaying let's just phrase it like this. You're repaying someone because you guys all went out to dinner. You're repaying someone because, they're reimbursing you for something you bought for them. That's all covered under friends and family type transactions, non-goods and services. That is not included in this conversation. Okay. Now, manipulation comes into play when people start overusing the friends and family thing, Jay. So that's what I feel like a lot of people have done and will continue to do. And that's a PayPal thing. Okay. If you are using PayPal for friends and family, but you're using it for thousands of transactions a year when you're clearly selling comic books, your account's probably going to get locked. they're going to throw, that's going to be a whole different conversation. I would not recommend doing that, using friends and family for thousands and thousands of comic book transactions, because you're going to get screwed in the end. And eventually you're going to have to deal with PayPal and probably the government. But let's just say, again, we're using a small amount of transactions, goods and services. Keep your receipts. You don't have to, it's like when you do your taxes, it's the same thing. You don't have to provide receipts with your taxes. Only if you get, if something happens and the IRS comes back to you and they want documentation, that's when you would have to provide those receipts or some type of paper trail. And again, we're not going to get into the details of that, because that's really getting down into like what a tax professional or an accountant will do for you. But like I said, try to keep as many receipts as you can. Try to stay below the thresholds, okay? Because they don't want small fish. They're looking at big fish.
Right.
Yep. They want to get into small businesses' pockets. I mean, that's really the long and short of this. And it's unfortunate because it's going to hurt a lot of small business. And I don't mean small business that are doing hundreds of thousands of years. I mean small business that are doing $5,000 and $10,000 just as a supplemental income on the side. Those are the people that are going to get hurt by this. Unfortunately, the letter of the law is the letter of the law. They want it, like Jay said, they want every dollar that you make. They want to scrutinize it. And now those thresholds are being lowered to do just that. Okay, so the $600, that was basically going to scrutinize. I mean, everything is $600 nowadays, right? So that's essentially as good as a dollar, $600.
For a business, that's a day, not a half a day.
Even a small business, even somebody that does it on the side, you're not doing much for less than $600.
Right. And here's the thing, like we'll just keep it to the comic book industry. A lot of mom and pops and brick and mortar shops, usually, a lot more now in 2023 have accepted credit card payments and stuff like that, but it's usually a cash business, right? And especially when you're making deals and buying books off the wall, it's like, hey man, if you got a credit card, it's this much. But if you have cash, same goes for shows. And we know that comic book stores in general and local LCSs tend not to do good unless it's a really good shop, right? It's a tough business to run. And now they're going to get hurt even more paying that online transaction, which they're doing basically just to survive with eBay and whatnot. And, people selling books on Instagram and live sales and YouTube and all that stuff. So it definitely hurts the industry a little bit. But again, if there's ways to weave in and out, they got to do their due diligence and put everything together properly.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like we're sitting on YouTube. So, this is a public video, right? So we don't want to give you the wrong information. We don't want to tell you to, hey, skirt it this way or find it, but you have to look at your pros and cons for everything. And we're just trying to give you what the letter of the law is. And unfortunately, that's what the IRS wants to do. They want you to go by the letter of the law. And that says if you're selling goods and services at a profit, they want their cut. And there's not much me and Jay can do sitting here about that. We're just trying to report it to you. And kind of just to sum up, what we went through is for 2023, nothing changes. So if you get paid by eBay, if you get paid by whatnot, if you're getting paid by PayPal goods and services, Etsy, Amazon, those things are going to be count towards that threshold, whether it's what it is this year, which is $20,000, whether it's $5,000, which is the threshold that's going to be come into play for tax year 2024, or whether this thing eventually goes to $600 threshold after 2024 or beyond. Those are the types of transactions that will be under scrutiny, that will be reported on a Form 1099-K.
I know this is affecting sellers now, but what I'm thinking in my head and what's kicking around is eventually it's going to affect buyers, because sellers, private sellers, and guys on whatnot and YouTube auctions and IG auctions, eventually they're going to start adding taxes in so they don't have to pay for this. So do you think that's going to affect the buyer in any way? Will prices go up? Will buyers who are buying on these platforms eventually get charged tax along with shipping on these type of products?
Yeah, I mean, platforms like Whatnot and eBay, they're already charging the tax, because, and again, I don't fully understand. You're still getting tax on your profit, and eBay's charging tax already.
Right.
So you could see a small increase on some sellers' prices based on how they're selling. Instagram sellers, that's kind of unmonitored. So you're doing your own thing. you're taking liability for whatever tax loopholes you may be trying to get around as a seller. As a buyer, yes, it could eventually create, a slightly inflated margin. But if buyers are always going to go to where they can get the best prices. So if every seller starts increasing their prices, then of course it's going to affect the buyer. Obviously, we've seen the prices increase on whatnot. Live sales are live sales. There's not much you could do about it. It's an auction. It's going to end no matter where it ends. But buy it nows in the marketplace, buy it nows on eBay, websites and things of that nature. That's where you could see maybe a small price increase because they are taking on extra fees, so they could kind of set the price. So maybe live sales are going to be where people start buying the bulk of their comics, because that's where maybe you can get the best deal on an eBay, on a whatnot, on an Instagram live auction like Elite Comics does. Maybe that's where you're going to start to see a lot of the push for these buyers, because that's where you can get the best price. So it'll be interesting. That's a really good question, Jay. So again, put it in the comments if you have a question. Say what's up in the comments. We love that. Hit the thumbs up so you could support us. We really appreciate you doing that. If you're new, hit the subscribe button. If you're not new, hit the notification bell so you know when we're putting out new content. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 5 p.m. Eastern is when our videos drop. And guys, live sales on Whatnot. Follow us down below. The link's below. You get $15 off your first purchase. And guys, big sale this week over on Whatnot. Gary, I'm going to put it in the link below. It's our Christmas year-end blowout. There's going to be a ton of sales. We have huge books going up. We got a first Harley Quinn going up. We got a first Poison Ivy going up. We got a first Rhino going up. So guys, you do not want to miss that sale. Link is going to be below. And guys, until the next time,